So good morning, everyone. Real quick, just to let you know, the RVP, the Regional Vice President, is actually sitting in this room for the Regional Operating Committee. That's Martin Jefferson over there, and I'm actually an ARVP, so handle government affairs and council on professional affairs for our region. If you didn't know, our region consists of California, Oregon, Washington, Hawaii, and Alaska. And yes, we actually have now included one of our latest chapters, which is from the Philippines. So the Philippines now has a chapter with us as well. And there's a section that's forming in Guam. So it just kind of gives you an idea of some of the things going on in the region itself. But nonetheless, welcome this morning to Ethics, the line for safety, health, and environmental. I thought this would be a really good graphic or a cartoon given that what we're in with this year. And what you can see is obviously Political Behavior Ethics Committee. And it says, well, the stabs in the back are acceptable as long as they're not below the belt. So I think we're kind of ramping up for this as we go through the year in this election year that we have, and I thought it would be very fitting on it. So nonetheless, I'm sure a lot of us are going to be questioning ethics and ethical practice just from what we see exhibited on the national stage, if you haven't already started to do that. But is ethics important to you? What do you think? Yeah? Okay, good deal. Yeah, I would agree. It's very important. Is ethics really defined as a black and white thing? No, it's kind of like, well, you know this is definitely bad over here and this is good, and there's this big gray area. And have you noticed, or those of you who may have thought about ethics 80 years ago compared to today, isn't it different? Very different. So that's kind of what we're going to get into this morning. So my history you already know about, and I do sit on the ethics committee for the society. I hope it's not because I'm sitting there, but we've become suddenly very active. We haven't been very active for about 10 years, and all of a sudden we now have had 5 cases come in front of us in the last 9 months throughout the society. I got to tell you, it's very, very interesting. My advice to you, if anything ever comes up from that direction, definitely participate in that process. It makes a huge difference as to how it's viewed from the ethical standpoint. So nonetheless, you already heard about me. This is what I thought I'd do this morning, is we'd start off with an introduction. I have kind of a business ethic issue, and we'll start from a grand scheme like that and bring it right into the safety professional itself. Okay, try to define what ethics is. I'd like to give you something to think about with this. Talk about some standards, which we do have a handout, and I do apologize, I only had a limited amount printed. If you don't have any, I know we've got a few more up here. Don't worry about it. This presentation, as well as this handout, will be posted on the website for the Bakersfield chapter. We're going to talk about dilemma, conflicts, pressures, what kinds of things drive us into that, to having an issue with regard to ethics. How you might be able to manage it. I'm going to give you at least an idea, a 3-point system to consider. Okay, if you're ever faced with an ethical situation that you have to make a decision on. And of course, throughout the whole thing, we're going to have different case studies. And yeah, actually, unfortunately, all of these are real. So without that, having said it at this point, let's get started here and talk about a scenario. So I want you to put yourself in this situation, okay? You're at a hotel, okay? Not unusual for those of us who are safety professionals. And you work for your company. You find out that the competition, the biggest competitor that you have in your industry, is holding a sales strategy rollout meeting at your hotel. Okay? So you got the scenario. It requires security to enter into the room where they are discussing this sales strategy rollout. Okay? But there's one unguarded door open. So here's your question. Do you go in? You tell me. No. No, a lot of people saying no, right? How many of you would say, be honest, how many would you say, yes, I'd do it? No one. Wow. Okay.
That's because we're not salespeople.
Because you're not salespeople. You're not. Well, okay. Let me broaden this out just to put it into perspective. Their sales strategy could affect you with your ability to have a job 18 months later. Now, would you go through that door? Still not. Okay. Yeah, I think. Yeah.
If I knew I wasn't going to get caught.
Yeah, you would if you knew you weren't going to get caught. I understand. Well, guess what? This person did. Okay, they entered that door, thought, ooh, here's an opportunity for me to see what they do on the other side. Maybe this is a good company to work for. Maybe I really want to find out what they're doing so I can combat this. And you discovered that it definitely will have an impact on your organization. So now you know, okay, this is really serious. This means that, yeah, my ability to earn a living is really going to be impacted. So you learn this. Now what do? How many of you would actually call your boss? Would you? You learn this? Okay. You're going to call your boss and say, what's going on? Okay, what happened? Now what do? You know. Yeah, you might as well finish the job. Well, this is based on a true case. It actually happened in the 70s. How many of you remember Sanka? Okay, so, well, I won't, I know, the two of us, yeah. Yeah, he won't. It's interesting because most people don't know what Sanka is. Sanka had an absolute corner on the market for instant coffees that were viewed as premium in restaurants. I mean, you went to upscale restaurants, Sanka, you didn't even ask for a cup of coffee, you asked for Sanka. That's what you asked for, right? Well, how many of you remember Taster's Choice? Okay, you remember that because you see it on the shelf, right? Or you used to see it on the shelf, okay? And that was the rollout sales strategy for Taster's Choice. And the person who went through the door was a Sanka person. Not a salesperson, but he worked for Sanka. When he learned what was going on, he said, hey, I got to call my boss. So he called his boss. And guess what Sanka did? They knew that this sales strategy was going to launch in 2 weeks. Sanka had a huge discount as long as you bought bulk. And what you would have to do is buy 2 years' worth of supply in order to get it. What do you think happened to Taster's Choice? When they hit the streets, nobody was buying. It fell flat. So here's the question. Is this ethical? Okay, from a business standpoint, is this ethical? Think business. Don't think as a safety person right this second. Think business. Is this ethical?
Yes, from a business. All is fair and love and war in business.
Ah, that's interesting.
I agree. I think it's a business. Your business is to make money and
Okay.
do better than your competition.
How many of you, okay, real quick, because this is interesting. How many of you are business owners in this room right now? Okay? How many of you are business owners in this room? And you have to raise your hand, I know. So, okay, it's interesting. All the business owners in this room are shaking their heads saying, no, this is not ethical. Okay? It could happen to you. Exactly. To them, to us, any of those things. Okay? Very interesting because, see, even with just a thing like this, you can see the line. I can see both sides of this. I get it. I totally understand that. But, and I do understand about everything's fair in love and war, right? That kind of thing. I get it. But is it really ethical? That's the key. And this is now a case which is taught in business schools from an ethics standpoint. There are others, some that we're familiar with, like Union Carbide and Bhopal, India. You know, what happened there. Those are different things too. But I like to bring that up because it really, I mean, how important is ethics in society today? Is it important? I mean, all of you in this room said when we first started out, yes, ethics is very important. I've got a study that'll show you it really is. Probably more important today than it's ever been. And you know what? Ethical practices are out there all the time. We just need to know what to look for. So, what does ethics mean to you? And that's a question for everybody in this audience. Anybody, shout anything out. What does it mean to you? It's honesty.
Doing the right thing.
Acceptable behavior, doing the right thing. Integrity. Okay, what else? Trust.
Doing the right thing can just depend on who defines what the right thing is, but doing the right thing when it's not even popular.
Yes, doing the right thing, depending, of course, on who defines what the right thing is, but doing the right thing also when it's not popular. You know, I think that's when we all get challenged from an ethical standpoint. I think we've all, heck, if you've been in safety for even 3 months as a new career, you know you're being challenged right away. There's no question about it. Well, here's something to look at. Typical responses is this, okay? Ethics has to do with what my feelings tell me is right or wrong. So it's based upon your feelings. Interesting. Ethics has to do with my religious beliefs. Okay? There are religious beliefs that are ethical. Being ethical is doing what the law requires. Okay? Ethics consists of the standards of behavior our society accepts. That means the United States. Okay? And I don't know what the word means. Isn't that interesting? That is one of the top 5 responses that they get when they ask people about ethics. So here's a way to define it. And I think it goes to what you said about, it depends on who defines. It's a system of principles governing the appropriate conduct for a person or members of a profession. Are we members of a profession? Do we have a code of ethics? Yes, we do. When was the last time you all signed? How many of you, real quick, are ASSE members? Okay. When was the last time you signed that code of ethics? When was the last time you even read it? Okay. This is one of the things that on the Council of Professional Affairs they're talking about is, hey, I signed it 40 years ago when I became a member. You always sign it when you become a member. You never sign it afterwards. So there it is. We're saying that it's a principle and it's how we govern ourselves as a society. Okay? That means the ASSE itself. And trust is the core ethical value. You have to trust that people will know and understand what that code means and abide by it as you work forward in your profession. So there are 2 things that you can look at with ethics. Okay? One is it refers to well-founded standards of right and wrong, and it prescribes what humans ought to do, what we ought to do. Okay? So rights, obligations, benefits, fairness, specific virtues, those kinds of things. If you look at our code of ethics, that's exactly what you'll find in it. But also it refers to the study and development of one ethical standards, because someone has to define this. Now, if you were wondering, that handout has it on the last page. Okay, the code of ethics for the ASSE. And guess what? It's being redefined. So this code of ethics you have now, maybe by the end of this year, you may have a different code of ethics for the ASSE because times have changed. And that's the thing with ethics. Once you define it, it doesn't stay that way. It moves as time goes on. So it's necessary to constantly examine the standards. And that's what the ASSE is doing. And ensure that they're reasonable and that they are well-founded. Okay? What ethics isn't is this. It's not feelings. It's not a matter, okay, of following one's feelings. A person following his or her feelings may recoil from doing what's right. Like you said, it's not always popular. And as a result, how many of you are willing to stand there when the world is ready to hate you for what you're about to say just to stand on your principle? Okay? And that really is the challenge, isn't it? Yep. And that's what this is about. In fact, feelings frequently deviate from what is ethical. So bear with me as I read through these, because I think there are points that really need to be brought home about how you define how you work within the ethics of this society and the profession you have chosen. Religion. One should not identify ethics with religion. Ethics applies as much to the behavior of the atheist as to that of the saint. Okay? And we all have different religious beliefs, in the United States especially. It's very, very, very diverse in that. So, ethics cannot be confined to religion, nor is it the same as religion. Okay? It's different. Okay? Law. Being ethical is also not the same as following laws. Laws, like feelings, can deviate from what's ethical, and the example given is apartheid. How many of you remember that in South Africa? Okay, is that the right thing for them to do? No. But yet, it was the law of the land. So that's not. You can't say that. Societies themselves also, being ethical is not the same as doing whatever society accepts. And I think we know that. I think we're kind of challenging that today, if you get that sense. An entire society can become ethically corrupt, and the great example of that is Nazi Germany. Okay? I think this drives it home. And I think you all are right on the same page where we need to be. So the impacts of ethics. All of you have said it's very important, and this study, I think, bears it out. Okay? A company acts ethically is a significant factor for people who work within that company. Okay? And here's how it has to do with Americans' willingness to be with an employer. Here's the results of it. 94% say it's a critical or an important factor. 94%. That means only 6% of the people working in your organization don't feel ethical practice or ethical behavior is something that is important or critical for them to stay with their organization. 80. I'm sorry? Salespeople. There you go. Well, at least I didn't hear lawyers, so that's the other one I always hear. So anyway, 82% prefer to be paid less and work for a company with ethical practices. No? Have you thought about that? Do you do that? I mean, I know I've done that in the past. I've had those opportunities, and it's like, and you know it because you're like, oh, this just doesn't, it's not right. You know, with what I know, where that line is, no, it's not right. 1 in 4 say they have witnessed unethical or illegal behavior. Now, we know also that ethics is not law, but certainly there is a component that we have within it. Okay? And 21% said they felt pressure to engage in illegal activity. Is it an ethical thing to ask someone to even do that? And that's really the key. So very, very interesting. So what we're doing is trying to take the bad versus what we say is good in that big gray line and start to shrink that gray line. That's what we're starting to do at this point. So here's an impact, and this is a story, unfortunately a real story. I don't know if any of you know this individual personally. If you do, I mean no disrespect to anyone associated with it, but it is a real story. So now we're going to bring it into the safety professional realm. And this is about an individual who started in their safety career with a brokerage, okay, insurance brokerage. And then, after a few years of learning things, decided that they could form their own company and partner with an industry group, which they did do, okay, and that actually occurred further north in this valley, this very valley we're in. Okay, they befriended Cal OSHA enforcement. Okay, now that in itself is not a bad thing to do. I mean, I know several people who are in Cal OSHA enforcement, and so do you. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay, it's a good thing. Had them on speed dial. Okay, now you can imagine, oh, let me get so-and-so. Beep, zip. Hey, how you doing? What's going on? This is what this person say. Great, thank you. Click. Okay, so you can see what's going on here. Public displays of affection with the Cal OSHA enforcement officers too. Hugs, hey, how's your family, all those kinds of things. Now, I'm going to pause here for a second. Is this an ethical issue at this point? Not yet. Not yet. Okay. Some people, when you kind of hit this point about public displays of affection, maybe, but you know what? We have friends for many, many years who have worked in other areas, and now they're a law official, you know, they're an officer. That's part of that. And you shake hands and you give a hug. Hey, we haven't seen you in a while. Okay? So, yeah, at this point, everything seems fine. Okay, here we go. They befriended industry group members also. These are owners or people who influenced owners within the companies that they wanted to work for. This person also attended weddings, births of children, baptisms, gave gifts as part of it. Any ethical issue at this point? Okay? If you want to kind of test yourself, look at that back sheet. Okay?
That would depend on the gift.
It would depend upon the gift. How many organizations have policies that you can't accept gifts either over a certain amount or gifts, period? Because it may have some influence. Absolutely. You know, we're one of them too. We absolutely have it. Okay? So you can see. They added 2 more people to the business to help. Okay? So right now it's like, okay, this is actually, they're getting engaged. They're trying to do something with this. Well, here's where it starts to go a little bit different. Clients observed this. There were high costs to trainings. Many of you either have procured training or you give training and you know where the costs lie in the marketplace. There's a band and you know that, okay? And here's where it was. $5,000 per person for an annual certification training. That's what it was. Now, to a lot of you, I've already heard the exclamations, and I do every time I tell this story. Okay? Is that a lot of money? Well, it's an annual certification.
For what?
In safety. Now you seeing? Yeah? And what you got was a big 2-inch binder too. It, included things like talking about confined spaces, fall protection, trenching, excavation, scaffolding, all those things. 9-hour course, $5,000. You got all that stuff. What do you think? Overpriced. Okay, most people would say overpriced. Oh, keep thinking about that, would you? Keep thinking about it, because you won't believe what you're about ready to see. There was also a habit of not showing up but collecting the money. So the training wouldn't be delivered. In fact, one person we found out, because I got the phone call, said, this person didn't show up at the time and then called and said, we'll send your employee over to my house at 5 o'clock. I'll do the training until 2 a.m. Is that ethical practice? Now you're getting beyond it, aren't you? You're starting to gray, that's a gray line. Now some people, we all are busy people. We know how it works, okay? But when you start looking at this, you'll start to see, okay, things start to pop out at me, okay, on the ethics. But they promised to make it up, of course, not providing handouts, which eventually they would, okay? And they parlayed the friendship with OSHA into, I can help you reduce fines for citations. Okay, that statement alone, I can help you reduce fines for OSHA citations. Really? None of you have ever gone in front of Cal OSHA and said, hey, at the informal, we need to see what we can do to reduce this because here's the circumstances and things like that. You can't do that? Okay, you can do that. Okay. Knew OSHA had a list on them. Now, does OSHA have a list on people? They have a list of industries, and they may even have a list of companies they're going to visit, but do they have a list of citations before they ever walk through the door? No. Okay. So you can see we're starting to blur this line. And we're continuing on with this. Had 2 gentlemen, remember the 2 that was hired? Had 2 gentlemen act as Cal OSHA officials. All right, have we crossed the line?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Now, you look at this, very easy to tell, okay, we've now gone beyond that point. Okay, confirm the list, and that's what they would do. They would say, yes, we are from Cal OSHA. Yes, there is a list. Yes, here's the cost that we're going to fine you. Okay, and opened up a bank account, O.S.H.A.
Wow.
Yep, I know where the bank account was opened. I know which bank it was opened. And that's what would be said. Don't worry, whatever you're going to write out goes to OSHA. See? Okay, unethical now, right? We're in illegal, unethical. Would any of you ever engage in a practice like this? No. Okay, I'm glad to hear that part. Yeah, overpriced, huh? $825,000 collected in 10 months. That's what they got. Okay? Huge. Huge, 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 huge. Okay, now if you want to know a little bit more about this story, we, as well as other consultants in this valley, tried to let OSHA know this was going on. It wasn't until we got a hold of one of the 10-hour cards that we shipped over to OSHA that all of a sudden the conversation on the phone changed, because they viewed us and the other consultants who were reporting this as, you guys just want us to come in and do something about your competition. That's not what this was about. So remember, we started this whole thing out about competition and being in business. Okay, this is not fair to all of us in business, as well as any of you that practice safety at all. This is unethical. Okay, so keep thinking about it. This is what did it. Okay, one client called another safety company to see how much they would charge for replacement cards, because they would sell you 100 replacement cards for your OSHA 10-hour at $9 each. Not bad, huh? Interesting. Very interesting. You think this stuff doesn't go on? Now, this is definitely an extreme from the standpoint of ethical practice, but you can see where the line suddenly started to blur. Yes, this person is in jail, 5 years. Okay? 5 years in jail. No one knows where the money is. Unfortunately, I don't think anybody will ever see the money. One of the 2 companies that were taken like this almost lost their entire business because it was the last money they had. Okay? But yet you could see how the trust was built, trust being the core ethical value, okay? And all of a sudden it was just ripped right away from them. So, anyway, what's the impact that something like this has to you? Anyone? Guilty by association. You better believe it. For 2 years, people in that area who knew this story and were very familiar with it, one person who was a victim of it would tell 10 other company owners. Okay, and there were safety people inside these companies questioned. Are you associated with this? Why would anyone do that? Okay, so the impact is big. How about to the profession itself? The stuff we practice. Okay, exactly. You can see it. What about to SHE and organizations, the departments? Absolutely. It was incredible to watch this fall out. If you don't believe that ethics is not important, this should definitely drive it home to you. And I think everyone in this room can definitely see it. I can see it on your face. You get it. You're right there with it. Okay? So very, very interesting about this. Ethics tends to manifest itself in codes, standards, and actions and behavior. And you can kind of look at it this way. The codes and the standards are mainly from an organizational standpoint. How many of you work for companies or businesses or organizations that have a code of ethical conduct? Okay? Exactly. And then you have one for your society. Okay? And if you're a CSP, you have one for that. Or a CIH, you have one for that. Okay? So you can see that these come in codes and standards. But it's the actions and the behavior that's your personal part. That's what makes that code live. It's what makes the standard be adhered to. So you don't have this negative kind of impact. And you're very right. A lot of times in safety, we are not the most popular people. I always tell people, you know what? If you enjoy conflict, this is your profession. If you like being on the debate team, this is your profession. Okay? If you don't like conflict and you really shy away from it, this is not your profession. You will be challenged this all the time. So it's very, very important. Okay? So we do know we have codes of conduct, and you do have it again on the back here. If you don't have a copy, I apologize. No worries. We'll put that up onto the website. But what you have on the front, okay, and the back side of the first page, as well as the third page that you have here, is really something, and don't do it now. Take it with you. Make a copy. Take it yourself and be honest with yourself. Okay? And I love this one here too, which is you make copies of safety materials that are copyrighted, protected, and distribute them in a meeting. Is that an ethical standard or an ethical issue? So I'm not going to give you an answer, but you have one there for yourself, and you have one there to kind of see where your organization stands with regard to ethical practice. And there's a reason why I bring this up, especially with regard to organizations, because believe it or not, safety has a great way of being able to insert itself into change in an organization and set a culture that's ethical. Okay? So, are we expected as safety professionals to uphold a higher degree of ethical standards, behaviors, processes? Are we? We are? Okay, we are expected to. Okay, so we have to be that way. Okay. How many of you drove here this morning? Boy, just about everyone. Okay. I did too. How many of you, when you leave here this afternoon, are going to drive past a construction zone that's active? Okay, most of us will because there's a lot going on right now. And when you look over in that construction zone, you're going to see violations. As a safety professional, do you have to now do something about it? This is your challenge. Because see, if we're saying that we need to hold ourselves to a higher standard, is it really true? You'll never get home. Especially if you, well, I know for me, I drive down into LA every now and then, and I'll tell you what, I'd never get where I needed to go if I did that. But certainly we definitely see it a little bit different. So why? We should, because we are safety professionals. We are here to protect people, the environment, all those things that we have said that we were going to go by. Why not? Because it's everyone's responsibility too, and that's what we are, is also a resource and a conduit for that part. So we do have different things that are out there. Safety professionals. What if any of us doesn't live up to our code of conduct? What should happen? Give you an example. We participate in public demonstration that results in vandalism or violence. Okay, so we're a member of the ASSE. We go and do this, and it ends up in vandalism or violence. What should happen to the member of the ASSE who did that? Out? Okay? There you go. Go ahead. Go ahead. The situation is you went to a public demonstration that resulted in vandalism and violence.
Sometimes things are out of your hands.
Depends on his role. Depends on the level.
Depends on role. Okay, so you're saying that if this person goes to a public demonstration and they're an ASSE member, okay, they're not representing the ASSE. They're an ASSE member. They're a safety professional. Okay, there's a code of ethics they have to abide by. And somewhere in that crowd, vandalism and violence occurs. It depends on the role, right? Okay. I think that's rather interesting. Keep going. How about they break a law? ASSE safety professional breaks a law. Okay. How many of you have ever gone faster than 70 miles an hour in this valley? You broke a law. Right? Depends on the circumstance, right? Okay. How about, well, we already said for speeding. Okay. How about breaking a law like violent crime? Okay. So far, have I said anything that anything about the ASSE professional doing something in their profession? No. Unless, of course, you're somebody who's all about traffic safety. So, but anyway. Cheat on a wife or a husband. Should anything happen? Okay. Refuse to do something to save someone based upon a religious belief. See how ethics can be challenged? Isn't that interesting? These are actually some very...
You can go back to
Yeah.
when you said ethics was standing up for somebody when everybody else would hate you for it.
Mm-hmm.
That's one that you believe in and you're standing up for it. Wouldn't that fall right back to that category?
Right here?
Yeah.
That one?
Even though it's associated with religion,
Okay, go ahead.
it's still standing up for what you feel is right.
That may be true, but really what I'm trying to do is put it in the context of a safety professional. So in that instance, I think what you have is a challenge going on. You have a religious thing that you may believe in, as well as your ethical practice from as a safety and health professional. They may come into conflict at this point. But if we were looking at it only as something upon religious belief, would that be then something that this society should take up as a challenge from an ethical standpoint and do something about? So the whole point I'm trying to make with this is that ethical standards do change, okay? And if you ever wonder where you stand and what should happen, come back to that standard for you as a safety professional. May not be wrong for what you believe in from a religious standpoint, but if it had something to do with protecting people on a job site, that might be a concern from a safety professional standpoint. Okay, otherwise, so I don't know. I mean, does that help kind of draw the context?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. I'm going to give you another one that may illustrate it even more for you as well. So everybody okay so far? All right. Good deal. What should the consequence be of any of these things for safety professionals? Should the society take this up? Because this is the kind of stuff we do see coming through at the ethics committee. Okay? Oh, I know this person did this. Okay, but what does that have to do with their safety profession? We're only a safety profession organization. We may not like what the person did. We may not like the person either because of what they did. But what does that have to do with us? Are we the governing authority for all of it? So, that being said, how about this situation? I'm sorry to say this is real. An ASSE chapter treasurer is found guilty of 3.5 years ago of embezzling over $30,000 from the chapter. The member served 2 years in jail and was ordered to pay restitution to the chapter, which is now in progress. It really is. Okay? I'm telling you this because the decision's already been reached and it's already been going. Last week, the member's name surfaced from a colleague in a neighboring chapter. She stated that this person is a new member to their chapter, very dynamic and showing great interest in running for a chapter officer position. I bet. Yeah, but not treasurer. I like that. What would you do? What would you do? Now we're talking about something that does affect our society. What would you do? What do you think should happen? Should the person be allowed to run for that officer position, whether or not it's treasurer? Oh, absolutely not. So, yeah, that is actually the decision, and really, because this person didn't participate in the process, they're not even a member of the ASSE. So it's all flagged, and believe me, we can definitely track. So unless you're doing something illegal, we're gonna find out. So ethics in practice, is this true? The end justifies the means. Okay, we hear this all the time. Well, the end justifies the means, or we used to hear it all the time. Absolutely right. I think that's good that you're saying no. But here's where you get into your dilemma as a person and in your practice. Okay? When the external pressure starts to go intense and your personal interest goes up, okay, it's a very, very high risk that people will deviate from their ethical practice. In fact, what they'll do is take that line and say, this goes, but for this situation, here we are. Right? Okay. And here's a dilemma for you to think about. And Corey Pitzer did this at the Errors Symposium in San Antonio. I really like the idea of applying it to the ethics thing here. And he said this, he said, would you save 4 people on the railroad track by pushing 1 person off the platform as the train is coming into the station? Okay, if you don't do that, 4 people die.
Do you know those 4 people?
You don't know those 4 people. I'm glad he asked the question.
Do you like the one?
I see people shaking their head no. I see people like, whoa, what a choice to be, dealt with. Do you not deal with this on a daily basis from a safety standpoint? Maybe you're not pushing the person off the railroad track here to save 4 people, but certainly your decisions of how you practice, right, could make a difference to 1 or 4 people down the road. Absolutely. Okay? So I'm glad you asked that question, because here you go. What if it's your son or daughter on the tracks? Now would you, yeah, you hear that? That guy's going. He's gone. Okay?
Why not yourself?
Ah, okay, I'm going to address that in just a second. It's your son on the tracks and your daughter on the platform. You going to push your daughter?
I don't know which one you love more.
It's reality. Okay? It's reality. Okay, I already heard something that someone said, and I think it's an interesting idea. Why not yourself? Why not yourself? And I think this does exist within the safety community. We do face these kinds of dilemmas all the time. Maybe not extreme like this, but we know this kind of thing actually happens. You read about it every now and then in the newspaper. Someone jumps, grabs a person, and they dive under the tracks just as the train's coming in. They save that person, okay, at extreme risk to themselves. So very interesting, very interesting. Just something to think about. The whole thing is context. You really have to think of the context. That's what challenges and sets up your dilemmas. Okay? The other thing is, of course, you have conflict and pressure. So you have personal interests where you can benefit from actions of being unethical, okay, and you get advanced at the expense of another. Okay? And it can be little things here and there that make that happen. Okay? Little things like saying, hey, I'm a CSP when you're not. Okay? Or I'm a member of the society when maybe you're not. I mean, those are little things that definitely help from an ethical standpoint, or an unethical standpoint, if you will. Organizational interests. There's a benefit from influence. And as a result, you're advanced at the inflation of your image from that organizational standpoint. So, sales things, I think, is what we're getting after on that. The conflict of interest, however, comes from that situation. And usually it's very easy to define when there's financial considerations there. But when there are other personal considerations, it's a little bit more difficult to do. That's when things start to change that line. That line's no longer straight. It now gets a little curvy. Okay? So you have the potential to compromise or bias judgment and objectivity. That's what starts moving that line, is that bias that we bring into this. And it involves the abuse, which could be actual, apparent, or potential of trust. Okay? And in people, professions, and the organizations. It's why I keep coming back to this whole thing on the code of professional conduct. If you ever want to just gut check yourself before you start making a decision, okay, and you want to make sure you're really close to that line, read this. You'd be surprised how all of a sudden your decision becomes clear as a safety professional. So I like to come back to it, as you can tell. The personal conflict of interest, of course, stems from all these things. The professional values, personal values, you have government sector law, organizational values, your personal interests, all those. Okay? But organizations, as you can see, all the different stakeholders that are involved with the organizations we work for, look at all the different things that happen here too. You know, the impacts on a local economy, consumes limited resources, pollutes shared environments, reputation and prestige. I mean, there's all sorts of influence for conflict of interest that happen. Okay? And every day we're challenged with this stuff. Decisions are made. So, have you ever contacted a regulatory authority to address something your employer or client won't do? Yeah? You have? Is that ethical to do?
That's sort of my line right there.
Yeah?
I have lots of clients and plenty of them don't do what they should do, but I can't cross that one.
You would be taxing a limited resource of Cal OSHA by doing that, right?
Yes.
Right. Okay? And see now, you know, one context versus another. Okay? I've done it in the past. I've only done it once. And I'll just share that as an example for you, okay? And the only time I did it was because I met a business owner who actually looked at me when I said, you have people dealing with muriatic acid and you're doing nothing to protect them, including ventilation. And you've got people just falling over dizzy half the time. They're lucky they're only dizzy with muriatic acid, okay? And so what did he say? You know what? They fall over, insurance pays for it, I get another body off the street. I don't care. And he was serious. That's when it was like, you know what? I have to draw a line at this point. I have to look at this and say, yeah, I can't do it. I was not a paid consultant for that. I'll just tell you, I was only acting as a safety professional. I was not paid by that person nor anyone else. I made the phone call. That's what I did. Now, that may be too harsh for some of you, fine, but I do say that I come back to that and it was like, nope, if I'm going to be an ASSE member and do this and be a CSP, I've got to take action with this. I can't just let this go. So it's the only time I've ever done it. Anyway, it's an interesting idea. You know, should you do it? And I think we know, you know, it really does. Okay, the process for analyzing a conflict of interest, okay, would be maybe to think about these three questions that you're going to see here. Okay, so number one, is the person subject to conflict of interest have standards, codes, or regulations that they're dealing with? Okay, so if the answer is yes, then you know you have that potential there. Okay? It can be covered by virtue, position, or role. Is there financial interest? This is the second one. Or other benefit that they would get out of it? If the answer is yes, you've now got two. So now you're getting closer and closer to this line of, okay, should we really investigate this for a conflict of interest from that standpoint? And number three, does the benefit flow to a conflicted party? Okay, in other words, I'm taking these actions so this entity gets whatever it is they want. And a lot of this is actually the standard for determining conflict of interest in a public sector. So I just kind of like that as a way of maybe looking at it if you want to know whether or not someone's breached their ethical bound or know where they're really at or even check yourself. Ask these three questions, and if you start coming up with conflict of interest, start looking at it. Really start double checking. So, managing it requires honesty. I heard that. Okay, fairness and impartiality. Okay, you've got to come in without a bias. And this is kind of what, kind of illustrating to you what the ethics committee at the society level does and how they look at this on the behavior of what our members do. And remember, trust is that core ethical value. Okay? So I'm going to use some work done by Tom Kraus. All of you familiar who he is? Okay, good deal. He presented this back in 2007 in Professional Safety. And I like this because I think this is a great way to show how safety can make that difference with regard to starting a good cultural change, a nice ethical change, and really being able to insert itself very nicely. So it suggests that the safety program can be the starting point for building an ethical organization. Do all of you believe that? Yeah? Absolutely. Absolutely it can. Okay, does it happen like that? No. We all know that. And I think that's where we get our challenges all the time about this. You know what's going on here, but boy, we've got to, it's going to take time. It took time to get there. So a safe workplace does lay that foundation. It's organizational excellence. That's the whole idea that you're driving towards, and you have to have integrity in that strategy, financial and operational performance, in order for that ethical organization to exist. Okay, so here are some of the principles that he presents. There's a value for human life. Okay. Do you really believe that exists in all our organizations, that there's a value for human life? Sure. Okay. In all the years I've practiced safety, that one business owner I mentioned where I did call authorities on it is the only person I've ever met who is in control of the purse strings or in control of the entire organization that ever said that. Every owner or senior manager I've ever dealt with, the one thing they've always told me is, while there's all this stuff going out here, the worst day for me would be if I have to pick up the phone or go visit someone and say, your loved one's never coming home. I don't want that. I'd be willing to spend almost any money to make sure that doesn't happen. Okay? How many of you experienced a fatality in the workplace? Yeah, not fun. You know all of a sudden that bears out very true. Okay? So there's that belief. Okay? It supersedes other goods. Integrity. The commitment to telling the truth and keeping promises results in the worker loyalty and commitment, even if it's not the news people want to hear. Now think about your organizations you've worked for in your career. Would this be true? Have you ever worked for some organizations where you know managers, supervisors, employees say things that aren't true because it's what the manager wants to hear rather than what's really going on? I think a great example of this is Mullally, I think, is the gentleman who has taken over Ford about 3 years ago. And they use dashboards. So you know dashboards, green light, red light, yellow light, that kind of thing. And he said that he would sit there and he never did anything about it to his managers. He let them figure this out because he just kept asking a question. Every week they would meet at the board, in their senior area, and he would sit there and say, give me progress, how it's going. And so for 3 months, they kept saying everything was green across the board. And at the end of 3 months, he looked and he says, it's interesting. Everything's green, and we lost $2 billion. Okay. And he left. The next week he came back, one person challenged it. Said, you know what, we've got one thing green on ours. Everything else is red or yellow. And here's why. And he did this. He started applauding. He says, you're getting the idea. We can't fix problems if we don't know them. You bury your head in the sand, you're not getting this. The integrity won't happen. Okay? And then you really have to question your ethics. Okay? Justice. Strong sense of fair dealing establishes trust. Absolutely. One person gets away with it because they're a great performer. The other person who is a moderate performer doesn't get away with it. You've already set your standard. That person's the favored one, and that's it. That means the ends do justify the means. And we've already agreed that's not a true statement. Okay? The good of the many. Okay? Excellence stems from concern of achievement of a common good. Absolutely. And that should be within all the goals and the missions of our organizations. And then, of course, excellent is the belief, whatever degree of safety or integrity achieved, always there is an opportunity to improve. Would you agree? I'll add one thing to this, because I do know a company which lives this, and I'll tell you, lives this. There is a garment manufacturer that does work in the United States, in California, is growing at a double-digit pace and making more money today than they ever have in their entire 26-year period. They do that because of this. The only problem they have, they never celebrate their successes. Pause every now and then, take a deep breath, regather yourself, and celebrate what you've achieved. When they did not realize what they were actually doing. This is an industry that we don't believe exists in the United States, and they're doing more money. Their second customer, largest customer they ship to is China, and they make it here. Okay? Very interesting. No, it's not a public company, so you can't invest in it. Sorry. It's privately held. So anyway, there's also principle-driven culture. Procedural justice. This goes right along with what was being brought before. Okay? If leaders make decisions in fair ways, workers follow without fear. Okay? And a lot of that becomes challenged when they're looking about layoffs. If they're going to happen, they're going to happen. Don't lie about it. Don't sit there and say it's not going to, because then all of a sudden people are no longer going to be part of the game. Okay, open and candid upward communications, even when it's bad news, allows ethical issues to surface before they become a crisis. And I do think that's very true. And the inclination of workers to approach peers on sensitive issues. This is a very difficult thing. A lot of times you'll see a coworker watching another worker, and you know they're not doing things safely, but they won't do anything about it. They won't go talk and say, hey, what should we do? You know, these are areas that are very difficult to address. but leadership comes into play at that point in time. This is stuff that doesn't happen overnight, but it definitely sets up for a better workplace. So, a couple more here for you. Perceived organizational support for espoused values. So employees see leaders demonstrate commitment to starting values, more likely are to respond in kind. That is leading by example. I'll give you an example of this. Okay, went and met with an employer many, many years ago. Okay, and he's saying, you know, we deal with plastics out in our facility. There's a lot of explosive and flammable type of materials. I can't get employees to stop smoking on the floor. I want them to smoke in the smoking area. I said, great, let's go out there and take a look. So we went out there past the sign that said safety glasses and hard hat, which I had my on, he did not. Okay, so you already know. Ooh, here we go. Okay, and he stood in the middle of his facility and lit a cigarette. Okay, is that? No. I mean, he sat there and he goes, so what do you think? I said, I think I found the problem. Okay, and they said, and he goes, what's that? And he said, I told him, I said, well, you're smoking here, but you don't let anybody else. Well, I own this place. So your cigarette won't blow anything else or catch fire. Oh, you know, he was very angry about it, but he saw the point. Okay, so this is very real. And management credibility. Employees who see managers as credible are more likely to take personal responsibility for performance and support new initiatives. They very much are. Now think about it, for yourself, for people who you've worked for. If you have a credible manager, don't you I feel like I'm part of the team and I am a valued asset. I'm going to do something myself that also helps. Okay? So there you go. Do you, as a safety and health and environmental professional, play a role in this whole idea of principle-driven culture? Yep, absolutely we do. We do have a value, and so don't forget about that. So anyway, I'll wrap it up real quick. We talked a little bit about ethics. As you notice, I didn't define it. I tried to get that gray area down this way. I do, however, really believe in coming back to this document. It's just a real quick gut check, and then you know where you really should fall on your decisions. And I like this too, how to stump a corporate lawyer. Well, legal is one way and ethical is the other. But anyway, so with that, thank you very much for being here this morning, and I hope they've given you something to think about. Thanks.